Hello, this is Elder Tahila from the Coven of the Open Mind, and you're watching Coffeelosophy. Hail and welcome. The topic this time is on empaths. So we're going to talk about what makes a person empathic versus empathetic. And we'll also compare being an empath with being a psychic. And then we'll talk about some ways that you know if you're an empath or not, and all of the various ways that being an empath might affect your life and the people in your life. So go ahead and get your coffee, and let's get started. I've got iced espresso today, and I'm ready to talk about empaths. An empath is a person who perceives of other people's feelings as being their own feelings. They literally feel other people's feelings as their own. It's different than being empathetic or exhibiting empathy, which may or may not have anything to do with actually experiencing another person's feelings. You can be empathetic towards somebody based solely on how you felt in a similar situation in a past. So a person comes to you and describes losing their job, and you can have empathy for them because you've lost your job in the past, and so you know how it feels to lose your job. And you can say to them, oh, I know how you feel, and you can connect with them, even if you have no idea what they themselves are really feeling. So their feeling is different than your feeling, similar enough that you can connect with them over it, but still different. An empath will feel this other person's emotions as if it was their own emotions. They will not necessarily be able to distinguish between how they are feeling and how this other person is feeling. And it's not a choice. So when you're exhibiting empathy for a person, that's a choice. Empaths do this without choosing to do it. It's something that they just do. So someone who is unaware of the fact that they are an empath may just think that they are very emotional, and they may not understand that the emotions that they're having have nothing to do with them and their own sense of self, their own ego. The emotions that they are feeling are not arising from the ego. They're arising from other people's egos. And if you need a refresher on ego, check out the first episode in Coffeelosophy. So a person who is an empath is not making a choice. They are just feeling the energies of the spaces they're in. They're feeling the energies of the people around them. They are invoking other energy unknowingly and without any amount of control, which is dangerous. Empaths are vulnerable people. They have to learn how to shield. They have to learn how to differentiate between feelings that are their own and feelings that come from those around them, or they will be more prone to delusion than an otherwise healthy person. So in a sense, being an empath is like being afflicted because it's not something that you control. This is why I don't understand why so many people claim to be empaths when they are not empaths. Many people are psychic. They can pick up on energies from people around them and from spaces, but they're not feeling those energies or those emotions as if they were their own emotions. They're just picking up on them. And then the emotional, if an emotional reaction happens, then that does come from their own ego. So a psychic person is communing with outside energies all the time, with or without choosing to do so, and picking up on things in non-physical ways. So not using the eyes and ears and things that they could have just observed with their physical senses. They're detecting changes in energy that are too subtle for the physical senses, and they're picking up on energy from another person's mind, so they're metaphysically receiving information and then processing that in a way that gives them some insight into what will physically happen. That is being psychic. That is like the golden standard, okay? If you want to become psychic, that makes sense. Empaths even are striving for being psychic, because invoking everything around you all the time is dangerous. It is not a state of being you desire to have. Many people are born psychic. I have never met anybody who was empathic who was not born that way. Being an empath is an intrinsic quality that someone possesses. It's not something that you would learn how to develop. There's no real reason why you should want to be empathic. You could always become psychic and exhibit empathy for people, and you will achieve the same effect as you would if you were empathic, but you are way less vulnerable to influence and to being manipulated. People who are empaths are often abuse victims. Okay, they are the kinds of people who have very small egos, who don't really put their priorities high up on the list. Empaths are constantly invoking energy, whether they want to or not, and it's something they have to become aware of and learn how to control, or it will destroy them. So that's the real difference here. Empathy is something you can choose to exhibit, which may or may not have anything to do with how another person really feels. It could just be you relating to them based on how you felt in the past. Being psychic is more like communing with outside energies without fully bringing them in, whereas empaths, people who are fully empathic, they are invoking the energy, they are feeling other people's emotions as if it was their own emotions, and they have to take the time to learn how to distinguish between the emotions that arise within their own ego and the emotions that arise within others' egos. So being an empath is not something that you would choose. It's something that you're born into. And there's no reason to choose it. It would always be better to become psychic. I'm not even convinced that you can become empathic. Maybe if you experienced ego death, it might be an inadvertent consequence of that. But even still, if you are at the point where you can force ego death upon yourself, you probably have a lot of self-awareness and self-control. So being empathic is not really something that would just happen to you in that case. So how do you know if you are an empath? You'll know. What I'm saying here, it will just be like, oh my God, I totally do that. Other people's emotions will feel like your own emotions. You'll have trouble distinguishing between your emotions and theirs. And we're not necessarily just talking about physical people. Okay, so empaths are the ones who are crying, not just like during a TV show when everyone is crying on the screen. Anyone who has any amount of empathy might cry along with characters. Empaths are the people who, say a character in a TV series that you watch dies, an empath is going to experience mourning and grief as if they lost a person in their real life. And it won't make any sense to the people around them. So an empath is the kind of person who will laugh when everyone is laughing even if they have no idea why it's funny. An empath is the kind of person who will walk into a crowded room full of lots of people and feel 10 emotions at once, and probably none of them even belong to the person in question. They're probably all outside feelings. If you are an empath, you will be exhausted all the time by everyday life. Most empaths have depression or some variation of lack of motivation that comes from being sapped of energy by the people around them. Empaths are very sensitive. They avoid hearing certain subjects or discussing certain topics because they know how it'll make them feel. An empath can't just talk about suffering on the other side of the planet as if it was some external abstract thing. For an empath, that suffering is something that they also feel. They may have absolutely no experience with starvation, but they'll know what it feels like because there are people who are starving and they can feel what that feels like for them. It doesn't really make sense. Being empathic is very rare. Most people who say that they are an empath are not. There is a spectrum, so some people will pick up on other people's feelings only if they're sad and not when they're happy, or they'll pick up on some feelings and not others. But again, most people who are empaths, who are truly empaths, do it indiscriminately and uncontrollably. Another staple of someone who is an empath, another sign that someone is an empath, is that they don't have a lot of feelings when they're by themselves. Feelings are exhausting. And if you're feeling everyone else's emotions all the time, then when you're alone, the last thing you want to do is have feelings. So empaths usually will have hobbies that involve zoning out and not things that make them feel any particular way. If someone is really an empath, they will know how you feel all the time. They might even know how you feel better than you do. This happens all the time with my husband, Ogun. So I am an empath. I was born an empath, and that's why I know that it is not an advantage to be an empath. I will be around Ogun, my husband, and he'll become frustrated with something, and maybe he hasn't had any outward symptoms of frustration or anything, but I will just be like, stop that. Stop feeling like that. It's making me feel bad. And he won't even know that he feels bad. Empaths mimic the feelings of those around them. So if you're talking to a person that just seems to always get how you feel, that person might be an empath. So most people are not empaths. I don't know why you'd want to be an empath. Anyway, when you are an empath, you have to learn how to shield yourself. But it's very tricky because if you shield yourself too much, then you will not be perceiving of anything in the outside world. Things could be happening in the world around you, and you would not know or perceive of them if you were shielding too much. Being an empath is about balance between allowing energy in and not allowing that energy to affect you. So if you're really self-aware, then you can let all of the energy in, and then you can just sort it out and say, well, this wasn't mine and that wasn't mine, but this was. And that's a fine way to keep track of things. But if you're not very self-aware and you're an empath, then you're going to have to shield all the time until you become self-aware, because it's dangerous to invoke everything. So you'll have to find a way to keep other people's energies from getting in, or you'll have to become aware of which energies are yours and which are theirs, and you'll have to just always know. So being healthy and an empath is very hard. And that's why I don't know why anybody wants to be an empath, that people would claim it's true when it isn't. But it's a really common thing. A lot of people think that they are empaths when they're really psychic. And like I said, being psychic is like the golden standard. You want to commune with everything. You want to consider the importance of these outside energies without allowing them to affect you. Empaths don't always have control over what does and does not affect them. They have to learn that control. So that's the difference between being empathic, being empathetic, and being psychic, and how you would know if you're an empath. It's something that you just kind of know. If you're feeling other people's emotions as if they were your own emotions, like, you'll know. It's something that it's just so profound. Empaths have small egos. They have a small sense of self. It's a necessary consequence of feeling all of these emotions that aren't theirs all the time. When you are constantly aware of how other people feel, it just degrades your sense of self and your sense of self-importance. So empaths are often abuse victims, like I said. They are often the kinds of people that put themselves into situations where they can be abused, they can be influenced and manipulated. And it's not like they necessarily do it on purpose. It's just like, it just feels right because that's how they see the whole world. The work of most people, when we talk about becoming more spiritual, will involve reducing the size of the ego and becoming aware of its boundaries. The work of an empath, when becoming more spiritual, will also involve becoming aware of the ego's boundaries, but it will also focus on growing the ego as well, because empaths tend to not have enough ego, and when you don't have enough ego, then it's very hard for you to relate to the world or to actually value your own happiness. And you have to value your own happiness in order to be happy. So one of the goals of spirituality and of religion is to be happy with your life. So for many empaths, growing the ego will be top of the list. That is like the only time when someone needs to focus on growing the ego to become more spiritual. Most people will have too much ego and will need to reduce it to become more spiritual. It doesn't matter. One state is not inherently better than the other. The gold standard, like I said, is being psychic. When you're aware of your ego and you're aware of the boundaries of it and you're communing with energy around you all the time, but you're not allowing it to affect you. That's what you should strive for. Someone said, can you become an empath? I think you probably could if you really wanted to, or if you experience ego death and it just kind of is a side effect of that. But most people who are empaths were born this way. And most empaths realize that they interact with the world and have feelings in different ways than the people around them. Most people realize that pretty young, like in their teens or younger. If you're confused about whether or not you're an empath, you can always leave a comment or shoot us an email talking about your experiences, and I'd be happy to comment and help you understand what's going on. It doesn't really matter. Like I said, it's not like being an empath is better than not being an empath. If you want to be an empath, you probably are not one because there's no real reason to want it. I mean, you can be proud of being an empath. I'm proud of the fact that I'm an empath because I do think that generally being empathic towards other people is a good thing. It's made it a requirement for me to be self-aware and have a lot of self-control over my emotions. And I think those are generally good qualities. So it's not like I would trade being an empath for not being one. If I could go back, I like myself. So I'm okay with everything that is true for me, that being an empath and all of the details that go along with it are things that I accept and have made my peace with. But there were many times where I wished I wasn't an empath. There are still times where it's very exhausting. Like I said, being around other people who are not in control of their feelings, who are constantly putting energy out there in the world for everyone else to feel, those kinds of people are very exhausting. And it's most people. Most people will show their emotions as soon as they have them. If they get angry, they'll sound angry. If they get frustrated, they'll sound frustrated. There's physical symptoms that go along with these feelings. When you're an empath, you might start to experience those same symptoms as the people who are experiencing the emotional reaction for no reason. And if you don't see the emotional reaction, say because it's by someone in the room who is not directly interacting with you, then you might appear to just like be moody. Like you might appear to just be experiencing some emotion for no reason. And it's not based on hormones, and it's not based on your interactions with whoever you're talking to. It could just be like the person at the register next to you is irate. So suddenly you're just like short-tempered also, and you're being short with your own cashier for no reason. So an empath has to say, no, I am not irate. The person next to me is the one who is angry, and I will not be angry just because they are. And has to experience, has to shield from this other person's energy and control how they act, even though they're picking up on a feeling that's not their own feeling. So being an empath can be a good thing. It can give you a lot of insight into other people, but it's more work than it's worth, honestly. You can learn how to feel what other people are feeling without having no control over it. You can learn how to feel how other people are feeling without becoming an empath. You can become psychic. You can become empathetic. You can choose to understand how someone else feels at any time. Whereas someone who is empathic can't choose to turn it off. They can only shield. And so they're usually introverts. They usually get very exhausted by being around people. And once they learn good shielding, then they might be closer to the middle of the spectrum. So when I first took a personality test, I was an introvert, like 70% in the introverted direction, like super far. And then years later, I took the test again after I had learned shielding and learned more self-awareness and all of these traits. So we're talking once during teenagehood and once during adulthood. And I was now like close to the middle, slightly on the extroverted side. So that's about what you could do as an empath. You can learn how to be slightly extroverted, but you will always need time to get away from people and to just reset. How can you help an empath if you believe that someone is empathic, but they're not aware of it yet? You have to slowly help them realize that what they're feeling is not really their own feelings. Get them to do mindfulness meditation. If they're having a lot of feelings that they really don't think come from them, or if you're like, are you sure that this is your feeling and not how your mother is feeling? You can try to help them by dissecting what they're feeling and just ask, why are you feeling that? Well, why are you feeling that? Well, why are you feeling that? And just don't stop asking why until they understand it. People always feel things for a reason. There's always a reason, even if that reason is hormones. So if you get to the bottom of a feeling and there is no reason, then it's not your feeling. Then it's someone else's. And the reason why you can't identify the reasons are because the reasons have nothing to do with you. So that is how you know if you're an empath and how you can help someone else know if they're an empath. Just break down their emotions with them and then help them figure out if it's really their own emotion or not. Empaths do pick up energy over text. It's not like quite as easy. And as I said, there is a spectrum for empaths. So some I've met I really do feel are empathic, but they just are hopeless over text. And that does happen. Most empaths will pick up on energy over text as well as they would pick up on energy in a room. So if you're talking to somebody online especially, and they have no idea how you feel, or they're making assumptions about how you feel that are not accurate, then they are not really an empath, because they should know how you feel. There are a lot of people who are convinced they are empaths when they aren't. I'm not exactly sure why people believing they are empaths when they aren't is so prevalent. I think it's probably just that being empathetic is something that our society prizes. having empathy for other people is often looked upon as being a good thing. I think generally it is a good thing when you can connect and relate to another person's experiences. But it's not like connecting through experiencing their emotions as your own is necessarily better than connecting by just saying, well, I've had similar experiences, so I can imagine how they must feel. It's not like one is inherently better. As long as people are capable of doing either, you'll have a productive society. So why so many people think they're empaths? I think it comes from the ego. I think a lot of people have large egos, and a lot of people don't understand themselves very well. It can be easy to say, well, I'm exhausted because of how other people feel, and then dismiss it of importance. That is easy. But coming to understand how you feel, understanding yourself and what causes you to feel the way you feel, that's difficult. So many times people might just say, well, this is just how someone else is feeling and it has nothing to do with me, because they don't even want to spend the time dissecting that feeling. I think that many times they are relating to another person through their own experiences, but they don't want to admit that for whatever reason. There's lots of reasons why that might happen. Maybe remembering how the experience happened for them is painful, so they would rather just pretend like they're feeling another person's feelings than address their own. People don't know themselves well, usually. A lot of times people know themselves so poorly that they might perceive their emotions as being external to themselves, even when the emotions are not external to themselves. You know that's common because people are always trying to blame each other for how they feel. Someone will be like, well, you made me feel like this. Did they? How? How did they make you feel anything? Unless you're feeling the other person's emotions as if you didn't exist, in which case that's not how you would have said it. You wouldn't have said, you made me feel this way, right? Because there'd be no sense of self at all. So you would just say, oh, well, this is just how you're feeling, so I'm feeling it too. But if someone is thinking, you made me feel this way, that is itself the product of ego. That is by itself a person saying, I have so little self-awareness and self-control of my own emotions that when other people do things, I have feelings and I have reactions and I don't understand them. That is a person's way of saying, I am not in control of myself. Nobody can make another person feel anything. Even as an empath, if I say, no, I'm not feeling that. I'm not feeling that. I reject that. I can do that. I can shield myself from another person's feelings. So the kinds of people who are saying things like, you made me do this, you made me feel this way, those are the least self-aware. So I think that pretty much covers what it means to be an empath. An empath feels other people's feelings as if they were their own. It's not a choice. It's something they just do. People are born empathic, and they have to learn how to distinguish between their feelings and the feelings of other people. People who are empathic are very vulnerable to outside influence, and until they learn how to shield, they can actually be in danger of invoking bad things that will change them or affect them in ways that are not in their own best interests. The gold standard is to be psychic. So if you want to experience a world outside of your physical senses, then you should work on doing it in a controlled way where you're communing with outside energy without bringing it in and allowing it to affect you before you even know what it is. So don't strive to be an empath, strive to be psychic. And if you are an empath, still strive to be psychic and learn how to control your emotions and be self-aware enough that other people's energy is not influencing your own. I hope that clarifies what it means to be empathic. If you have any questions, you can always drop a comment here on the video or email us at covenantoftheopenmind@gmail.com. Everyone, finish up your coffees, and from all of us here at the Covenant of the Open Mind, blessed be.